Hare Krishna, and a very warm welcome to all of you who have joined us this evening for our very special Gita Week program. It's lovely to see many of you have been constant in your attendance and have been joining us on every one of the evenings thus far, and we're almost reaching Janmashtami evening. And in anticipation of that, this Gita Week program has been very enlivening. Particularly, there's been a lot of positive feedback from our attendees who have been listening into our programs, joining us both on Zoom as well as on Facebook. So once again, I'd like to extend our very warm welcome to you, and a particular warm welcome to our presenter this evening, and that's His Grace Sesa Prabhu. Before I introduce Sesa Prabhu, I'd like to just remind all of you tuning into this program to please listen in attentively, because during the course of the program, there will be a question that will be posed based on the content of the presentation today. And the first person to get the answer correct in respect of that particular question stands a chance to win a copy of the Bhagavad Gita. So also I'd like to make mention that whatever questions you may have based on the presentation this evening, please feel free to pop your question into the chat box so that we could later pose it to the presenter. That's in about 45 minutes time. 15 minutes before the close of the program, we will be presenting questions to the presenter. And in the meantime, if you can, prior to that, send us your questions in the chat box so that we can collate those questions and be in readiness to pose those questions as well. So now, without further ado, it is my extreme privilege and honor to be able to introduce a very special personality, and that's His Grace Sesa Prabhu. He actually joined ISKCON in 1973, inspired by the political activism of the In God We Trust Party for Purified Leaders. So that was the name of that political party, In God We Trust Party for Purified Leaders. It was organized by members of ISKCON. He was initiated by Srila Prabhupada in 1974, while he was traveling as a member of the initial Bhaktivedanta Book Trust Library Party, which placed the writings of Srila Prabhupada in university libraries and classrooms throughout the world. He attended the United States Military Academy at the West Point and later received a degree in political science from the State University of New York, Albany. In 1991, he earned a Juris Doctor degree from UCLA School of Law. So he's a practitioner in terms of a legal practitioner. He served as the temple president of both Washington and Philadelphia temples, as the managing editor of the Back to Godhead magazine, which you're all very familiar with, I'm sure. Here in South Africa, we're very big in terms of promoting the Back to Godhead subscriptions. And I know there's some very exciting subscription packages that are currently available as Janmashtami specials. So it's wonderful to have someone of his stature who's the managing editor of Back to Godhead magazine. He's also served as the North American trustee of the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust. He was appointed as a GBC member in 1994, so it's almost 3 decades now that he's been serving as a GBC member, which is, of course, the governing body commission of ISKCON, the ultimate managerial authority. Sesa Prabhu has a portfolio as a GBC member in terms of 2 ministries, that being the Minister of Educational Development and the Minister of Justice, both of which ministries I've had the good fortune of and continue to serve with him in those capacities under his leadership. He will now speak to us on Gita values, the principles from the Bhagavad Gita that actually enrich our lives. So welcome, Sesa Prabhu, and I'd like to hand over to you.
Dr. Devi, I'm very honored to take part in this week-long celebration of Lord Krishna's teachings in Bhagavad Gita. I can think of nothing better in the week running up to Sri Krishna Janmashtami to try to focus on these important instructions that are there in Bhagavad Gita and how they apply to our lives and indeed the entire world. So thank you, Shambhakalata Devi again, and all the devotees in South Africa who are tuning in to this presentation. I thank you for giving me your association, and hopefully I can say something in contribution to what's already been said by the speakers you've had this week. Quite an impressive group of devotees. Many of them are my close friends. And I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to listen to hear what they had to say. But as far as the subject matter tonight goes, the Gita values, I'd like to ask your indulgence in starting off to play around a little bit with your title of this series, Gita Week. It kind of rhymes with Gita Walk. We have a saying here in America that a person that has integrity walks their talk. It means there's not a difference between what they say and what they do in their lives. And so I'd like to add to Gita Week, maybe Gita Talk and Gita Walk, because that's what I want to focus on this evening. How we suffer, fail at our mission when we neglect basic principles of Bhagavad Gita, basic principles of good governance, and how we can rectify the situation by focusing on the different values of life that are found in Bhagavad Gita. So to do this, I'd like to look at a section of Bhagavad Gita that may not be studied so often. It's from the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. But you know, Bhagavad Gita in the second chapter, Prabhupada has given us contents of the Gita summarized. And so in this second chapter, basically, Krishna is trying to convince Arjuna to fight, and he uses different motivations. That's one thing about the Gita. It's certainly meant to inspire action and change and direction in the lives of those that are affected by it. So in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna uses jnana, karma kanda, buddhi yoga, sthita pragya, or samadhi, all to encourage Arjuna to fight. And so what specifically I'd like to look at are the karma kanda section verses in the second chapter, text 31 through 38. I'll read those verses so you can get some idea of where we want to go in this. But I'd like you to keep an ear out and listen for certain concepts that I think are important and that we'll examine. So keep these things in mind as I read through the verses. Basically, 4 concepts are found in these verses 31 to 38 that have a profound impact on who we are and what our society is like and what we can achieve in life. Actually, I call this this topic a call for greatness or a call for leadership. And so those will be subject matters we talk about. First, let me offer some prayers to His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, and to all of you, so that we may all achieve something auspicious on this eve of Janmashtami. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Te Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Shrinivari Paschatya Desataya Om Agyana Timarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmalitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vajikapatrubyascha Kripasindhubhya Vacha Titana Pavanibhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So as I mentioned, these verses aren't studied that often in Bhagavad Gita, but they are valuable. They contain valuable instructions, and they are relevant to our lives, as everything Krishna says is relevant to us. So I'll just read the English translations as we go through. Considering your specific duty as a Kshatriya, you should know that there is no better engagement for you than fighting on religious principles, and so there is no need for hesitation. Oh, I forgot the concepts. Okay, 4 concepts, listen for: duty, reputation, infamy, and criticism. Duty, reputation, infamy, and criticism. So listen for those things as we go through these verses. Let's start once again. Considering your specific duty as a Kshatriya, you should know that there is no better engagement for you than fighting on religious principles, and there is no need for hesitation. O Partha, happy are the Kshatriyas to whom such fighting opportunities come unsought, opening for them the doors of the heavenly planets. If, however, you do not perform this religious duty of fighting, then you will certainly incur sins for neglecting your duty and thus lose your reputation as a fighter. People will speak of you, of your infamy, and for a responsible person, dishonor is worse than death. The great generals who have highly esteemed your name and fame will think you have left the battlefield out of fear only, and thus will consider you insignificant. Your enemies will describe you in many unkind words and scorn your ability. What could be more painful for you? O son of Kunti, either you will be killed on the battlefield and attain the heavenly planets, or you will conquer and enjoy the earthly kingdom. Therefore, get up and with determination and fight. Do thou fight for the sake of fighting, without considering happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat, and by doing so, you shall never incur sin. So these are Krishna's instructions to Arjuna based on the concept of his duty in society. Duty means obligations to others, and we're born into this world with so many duties. No one can say that I don't owe a debt, at least of thanks, to anyone that they may meet or encounter in their life. So duty has to be performed. Again, of course, we know the transcendental ultimate goal of the spirit soul being free by following Krishna's instructions in Bhagavad Gita, the ultimate instructions. But again, these basic instructions about how to create a society, how to be an influential person in that society, are being instructed in this Karma Kanda section of the 2nd chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And it begins with duty. We have duties to others. We have duties to God, first of all. We have good duties to all living beings. And we're all part of an integrated system. Elsewhere in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks, Chaturvarnya Mahashasam Guna Karma Vibhagasa. He speaks about the Varnashram system where all of us have a particular role in society, a duty to perform, and how that duty matches with others and works in an integrated way for the benefit of everyone. And so Arjuna had that duty. But what was he proposing? What was the true impact of his desire not to fight? It was actually being irresponsible as a leader. There's a great need today in society, and that's why I chose to speak on this topic. And all over the world, there's a great need for leadership and indeed greatness amongst mankind. There was a leader, a civil rights leader here in the United States. His name was, what was his name? John Lewis. John Lewis. He worked for the rights of all people in this country since the 1960s, when Martin Luther King was active in pushing the civil rights movement in the United States. And it was very interesting. He died recently, and at his funeral, he was lauded as a Gandhian and Satyagrahi. They actually used these Sanskrit terms, Satyagrahi, in the eulogy. And people considered him a great man because he had principles he stood for. And so we also need, if we're going to influence this world, we also need great people. And Bhagavad Gita is meant, and the Gita principles that are derived from Krishna's teachings in the Gita are meant to foster an atmosphere where greatness in an individual can be had. So to meet that standard, it begins with duty. And if we don't follow our duty, then we're irresponsible. We're irresponsible. And society as a whole suffers. So along with duty, there's also a culture of respect that's needed. Not just that we have people considering themselves great, but that they don't respect all others. A culture of respect has to be established in which people have open hearts and are willing to open themselves to others and willing to help others, give shelter, take shelter. We learn this principle quite strongly in performing devotional service, how to shelter others who are in distress, who are needing help and understanding the goal of life. We practice these things practically on a daily basis, giving shelter and taking shelter ourselves. But the society in general around us lacks this key component of life. Instead of respect, we live in a culture of criticism, distrust, and exploitation. Thus, the world is facing one crisis after another. But we're meant, as devotees of Krishna, according to these verses of Bhagavad Gita, it's being pointed out to Arjuna that if you don't do your duty, then this culture of criticism, exploitation, disrespecting others will flourish. We're reminded of the Srimad Bhagavatam description of Maharaj Vena, who was a very cruel person, but somehow or another came into position as the king of society. And what did he do? He tormented his own citizens. He He tormented animals. He disrupted the environment. He was a great disaster to the society that he lived within, because he neglected his duty and could not provide this system, this culture of respect that is so necessary in human society. So without doing our duty, we don't give shelter to all living beings. We're irresponsible. And without fostering this culture of respect, then we're opening the door to hell by allowing all kinds of criticism, exploitation, distrust to flourish. This is what Krishna is pointing out to Arjuna here. Not just Arjuna himself, but the entire society, because it's an integrated whole, suffers when any one person or one individual doesn't understand their duty or doesn't perform their duty. Now, it's not just a matter of spiritual life itself, not just a matter of material society being horrible, but actually when we don't do our duty, we don't try to rise to the standard of greatness or leadership in society, then our spiritual lives also are affected. Bhaktivinoda Thakur has spoken about this in his Sri Chaitanya Shikshamrita when he talks about a culture of respect. He says that culture means proper relationship with the environment, relationship with other human beings and other living entities, and ultimately our relationship with God. Srila Prabhupada was very concerned about society at large and his society, the development of his ISKCON society. And towards the end of his time with us, he wanted to introduce and see practiced a system of varnashram. Same type of system we're speaking here, the integrated system that Arjuna was living in and serving in at the time of the Mahabharata war. He wanted to establish varnashram. Now, some will say it was meant for outside the society of devotees. Some will say it's meant for inside the society of devotees. But I think we can all understand how if we embraced this system of varnashram, it would do good for us, and it would do good for the society around us as well. And of course, given our relatively small numbers in the world, having an example of working varnashram system would probably be more influential than trying to change world governments. But we have to start somewhere, we have to start sometime. And it can begin with us as individuals. Otherwise, we'll descend. We'll descend into the modes of nature as they take us one by one and lead us to ruination, neglect of our duty, as we see Arjuna faced with here. And what will happen is that our society can turn into a society not where there's a culture of respect, but there's a culture of disrespect. Unfortunately, we see that in social media these days. It's so easy to be disrespectful, even to other devotees. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives an analysis of what a culture of disrespect looks like. He gives 4 principles of disrespect and how they affect the person that engages in those behaviors. First is avagya, when we look down at somebody else. The result of that is we become more hypocritical ourselves and start judging others. You can see this in the verses in Bhagavad Gita. It's mentioned there that the kings that once respected will start judging Arjuna. They'll call him bad names, and the culture of disrespect will grow. So it begins when we think that we're better than someone else and we can look down upon them. That's the start of hypocritical behavior and where we judge others. Point number 2, upeksha. We deny somebody's existence. Means basically we become impersonalists. We neglect others, not only neglect their needs, but neglect their existence even. Not even a haribo for somebody because we were affected by this upeksha. And the result, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, is that we lose our faith in God. So by avagya, we become hypocritical and start judging. By upeksha, we lose our faith in God. Then dvesha, we actually begin to hate other people, other devotees. It seems unimaginable, but if we don't check our behavior, if we don't take good instruction, then nothing good can be expected to happen. Hatred of devotees results in living in a hostile atmosphere ourselves, becoming very insecure ourselves and seeing everyone and everything as a threat against us. And finally, 4, ninda, openly criticizing someone. With this, our lives, our spiritual lives are completely destroyed. So we have a choice before us. Will we choose the path of greatness and give up this culture of disrespect? Or will we remain attached to what tiny pleasure we get out of criticizing others, and in that way ruin our spiritual life? I asked that question rhetorically because I know that none of you would choose the path of a culture of disrespect. So if that's what can happen to us, what can we do to prevent that? What active steps can we take in our lives to prevent falling in this culture of disrespect? Well, doing our duty is one thing. That means finding our place within a Varnashram society. It means continuing our duties, our Krishna conscious duties, as they've been given to us. That's a task that the GBC has to spend some time doing, working out in my mind. If you ask me how our regulated devotional service can take place, yet we can take advantage of this institution, this integrated system of protection that Prabhupada called a safety net, how we can introduce that at the same time. But what are we to do? Well, Chambakalata Mataji mentioned that I would speak about Gita values. let me tell you about this project. A group of devotees, including one of the speakers you had, I think, yesterday, day before, Brahmatirtha Prabhu. A group of devotees working with the Ministry of Justice met over a course of a couple of years, trying to develop key values that could be derived from Krishna's teachings in the Bhagavad Gita, and how these things can become a valuable tool to deal with individual difficulties, societal difficulties, as well as presenting ourselves in a what we believe type of format to the society at large. And I found myself in my work as a zonal secretary of the GBC that these values, these Gita values, have been very helpful in resolving problems that devotees have, especially relationship problems. We were talking about the culture of respect, how it's not only the society, but the environment, individually. All these things are impacted in a society, in a culture of respect. Well, these Gita values represent positive attitudes, positive actions that can be taken by each and every devotee of Bhagavad Gita to help overcome individual and societal differences. As we go through them, I ask you to think about those four concepts that we spoke about. They were duty, reputation, infamy, and criticism. How these Gita values undercut the things which prevent us from cultivating an atmosphere that's really conducive to our spiritual advancement. So there are 6 of these Gita values. I'll just go through them, making a little point about each of them so that you can get some idea. If you're interested in receiving a copy of a listing of these things, I can make them available to you, however is most expedient there. But what are the Gita values? First one, samadarshana, or equal vision. Equal vision means that we acknowledge that there are differences amongst human beings. There are differences amongst animal species of life. We don't deny them as if we are foolish people or something like that, by saying that everyone is equal on a material platform. But rather, we encourage people to understand that the real substance of equal vision is spiritual equality. How we can all be seen as persons. It actually awards personhood to every living being. I do some study of ethics from time to time, and there's a whole school of ethics now that's developed. And maybe you know, giving personhood, in other words, legal rights to rivers, forests, where living beings are there that are not just there for our exploitation, as the culture of disrespect would have. But by seeing this vision, equal vision, samadarshana, we can actually understand how personhood should be given to all. because it links us with the origin, the spiritual origin of all of us, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Just think what a different world we'd live in, if people adopted this principle of equal vision. And while you're thinking about the differences that could make, think also about what your duty is to introduce that, however you can, in the world, in your interactions. So living with Samadarshana, or equal vision, is the first of the Gita values. The next is Icha, or choice. And this is important in terms of our interaction with other people, choice. We give other people choice. We cannot demand or dogmatically say that you have to have this, you have to see the world like this. Rather, we have to, as another one of the principles will show, we have to teach by our example and give people the choice to make it themselves. Ultimately, although Krishna used all these different methods to instruct Arjuna to fight, ultimately he left it up to him. It was his choice. He had to make the choice to fight. And so we should be aware that this choice and promoting it is an effective way of being a leader. Leader doesn't mean you do it all yourself or you have others do everything themselves. It means that your duty to others is to make sure they understand and they make the right choices in life. And so Icha, or choice, is the second of the Gita values. Third is Ahimsa, living without harming others. And we considered how cruel words violate this principle of Ahimsa. As I mentioned, the culture of disrespect is marked by criticism, distrust, exploitation, and can often begin just with the words we speak to others. Gita advises that there's an austerity to speech. And part of that austerity is to speak in such a way that it's pleasing, not harsh and critical. Again, we don't want to be sentimental or foolish by saying there's no time or proper use of corrective speech. But it's our responsibility as followers of Bhagavad Gita to utilize our speech properly and avoid cruel words meant to hurt others. Of course, there are many other aspects to ahimsa, how the world would be different if this principle was adopted. When we think about the animal slaughter that goes on, it's actually mind-boggling how many animals are killed just to satisfy the palate of people in the world today. And Prabhupada directly linked such animal slaughter to the wars that are constantly raging at some place in the world today. How to get beyond all these things is to take a stand. Be courageous. No, I won't do this. No, I won't engage in this type of behavior. I will see that I have a duty to others and try to execute what I can for their benefit. And in this way, lead a life of ahimsa, or life without harm. Next principle is acharya, or teaching by example. I mentioned this briefly before. But in acharya, if you're going to teach by example, you have to be a good example. You have to walk the talk, as I described at the beginning of the talk here this evening. Not just that we give mouthpiece to so many elevated or elevating positions that we can take in society, but that we actually lead our life according to these principles. If we can do that, then we can be living with integrity, which is walking your talk, which is making you a true follower of Bhagavad Gita. And we can give an example of dignity and respect to others. Practically speaking, that's the greatest gift we can give to others, is an example, leading our life according to dignity and thus showing dignity and respect to others. And I mentioned a culture of greatness, a culture of leadership. This is the kind of thing that I'm referring to. And anybody can show that kind of leadership or greatness. You don't require a lot of money. You don't require a big position. You don't require any of these things, just a good heart. It's the essence of education, actually, is teaching by example. It's a acharya principle. So think about it, how you can employ that strength in your life as you go about your daily activities. So we have two more. Amanitva, or humility. Actually, Arjuna, he thought he was being humble by refusing to fight. Let them have the kingdom, it's okay. I'm not going to fight my relatives. No, that is false humility. Therefore, Krishna insisted that you must fight. Humility means understanding our obligations to others and fulfilling those obligations, no matter what. We all have roles to play in the grand scheme of things that are beyond us. And we need to be humble enough to recognize that. Again, not a false humility that has us refrain from acting, but genuine humility in which we see ourselves as part of a system like Varnashram system that has duties associated with it, and we do our duties very cooperatively. And also in our personal interaction with others. Actually, humility is the most attractive quality that we have to offer anyone. And so we should take it. And then finally, there's priti, or affection. Affection, without affection for others, without affection ultimately for the Supreme Personality of God, we have no platform to stand on. Devotees are compassionate by nature. But what's the basis of that compassion? The basis is love for all living beings. We have to tolerate. What's the basis for our tolerance? Because we love our fellow man in such a way that we're willing to be tolerant with them, to set a good example, as the Acharya principle says, and to benefit them by our association. And what to speak of the ultimate teachings of Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, the goal of our lives as devotees is to develop our affection for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Do we think that we'll achieve that while neglecting or treating harshly devotees of the Lord? No, that's not possible. So these 6 principles, values, we encourage all devotees to make part of your life, your daily life, because they are building blocks of a culture of respect that's based on our duties to others and our duties to God. This is a path to true greatness or leadership. And I think we need to answer that call. Others are answering it in ways like I mentioned, Congressman John Lewis. There's a young girl, Greta, that's taken a world leadership position, a 14, 15-year-old girl. Where are we? Where are we in articulating our stance, these 6 principles, and moving forward Krishna consciousness to the front of people's, as an answer, because there's a problem. There's a need out there for these teachings, and so therefore we're presenting them in our study of Bhagavad Gita, because they're not different than what we hear in Bhagavad Gita. They're relevant, beneficial instructions, even though we know that the ultimate goal is for the spirit soul to surrender to Krishna and do his duty based on spiritual love. But a lot of people may not understand that at this point in their spiritual evolution. Therefore, we have a duty to go back and take their hand, walk with them through these 6 principles, create a society of respect that's conducive to the spiritual advancement of all people. And I'll just end with another political metaphor. When I was growing up in the 1960s in the United States, the politicians came up with this idea of a great society. America was a great society. America wasn't a great society, and many people are bitter and disappointed to this day about that. But ISKCON and all that Srila Prabhupada has given us, and most importantly, Bhagavad Gita, is the basis of a true great society. And so I encourage you all in your study of Bhagavad Gita not to neglect this aspect. Try to cultivate a culture of respect amongst each other, and try to practice these 6 Gita values, something that people can recognize and that can change the world. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Are there questions?
Thank you very much, Prabhu, for that very enlightening talk. I think it's very relevant in terms of very relevant to today's society, what you're mentioning about respect, and to inculcate that culture of respect, and to avoid those kinds of different types of disrespect that is shown in the form of being hypocritical, denying someone else's existence, and criticizing devotees, as well as the hatred that is shown and the disrespect to the Lord eventually. I think it's very, very important that, no matter what our age is, we have young children on watching in. It's a very good topic to basically inculcate from a young age, and also as more mature people, we're meant to be more mature and be more mindful of this. But I think it's very good that we have got to reflect on these kind of issues very pertinent issues that you've raised in this, which we sometimes omit and subconsciously begin engaging in without realizing that we're actually furthering the aspects of disrespect as well. So thank you so very much for that. Before I put the questions to the presenter, to Sesha Prabhu, I want to just make known the the competition question. So there was a lot that was said this evening, particularly about respect, and in terms of how we are to conduct ourselves, to improve ourselves, and ultimately to grow in our spiritual lives as well. Sesha Prabhu mentioned something very important, and that's the question that I'm putting out to you today. So the question is, what is the essence of education? And if you know the answer to the question, please pop the answer into the chat box. The first person to get it correct will be given the prize of the Bhagavad Gita. So the question again is, what is the essence of education? I'd now like to turn to the questions that we've received. And there's one that has just come through this very moment a couple of seconds ago, and that is from Yugen Chetty. When must I get serious about spiritual life? When I am old or young? Remember, I need to work for a living. So, Sesha Prabhu, perhaps if you could just comment on that. The question is, when must I get serious about spiritual life? When I am old or young? Remember, I need to work for a living.
Well, I think that you should get serious about spiritual life right away. We don't know whether we're young or old in terms of when death will knock on our door. In our community here in Alachua, Florida, just yesterday, we had a very young lady, I think she must have been in her 30s, and she just passed away from cancer. Her name was Shamali Dasi. She's a disciple of Indradyumna Swami. And we're all thinking, oh, she was so young. But death can come at any time. So we have to make our priorities in life. Now, I'm not advising that you just give up everything and become a brahmachari living in the temple. But you have to realize, again, it's your choice, your choice to to build your life in such a way that you include spiritual practices every day. And if you do that, gradually you'll feel more satisfied materially and spiritually. So take a courageous step and say, well, I'll do this from now on, or I'll chant so many rounds. You start with a few. But you have to make some definite step, because that's what this life is meant for, spiritual understanding. So you can get help from senior devotees there. They can advise you.
Thank you, Prabhu. The next question is there a possibility of following and living the Gita values but forgetting the Lord?
Well, if you take them as materially based, if you take these Gita values as something that are materially based, then maybe you will forget them. But and maybe we need to do a better job in presenting them to you. But how these were derived was from studying Krishna's words in Bhagavad Gita. So they're not different than Krishna. And so the whole idea is these are essential teachings from Krishna. And if we understand them like that and study them like that and we try to apply them like that, then there's no chance of forgetting Krishna.
Thank you very much, Prabhu, for that very insightful answer as well. And on that note, we've come to the end of tonight's program. But before we conclude, I'd just like to make the announcement of the winner of today's competition. And the winner is Praveen Ram. And if you could please provide us with his contact details, that is his telephone number and email address, send it in the chat box to the host only, and they'll be in contact with you shortly. Sesha Prabhu, we'd like to thank you very much for the very enlightening class, particularly the fact that, reinforcing the dire need to inculcate the culture of respect once again within society. And if us as devotees can begin to practice that, then certainly the future looks very bright for not just within ISKCON and our lives personally, but for society at large as well. So on that note, I'd like to say a very big thank you to Sesha Prabhu and to all of you who have joined us this evening. I see there's a couple of comments that have come through. There's a comment from Raghunath who says, Hare Krishna, wonderful class. Bhavyata Nathu says, thank you for sharing the Gita values, Hare Krishna. So we have, and then Sanjana is also saying thank you. So there's a lot of appreciation to you, Sesha Prabhu, for joining us this evening. I know under normal circumstances, we would not generally have the opportunity to have someone of your stature, and particularly you personally, come to South Africa and present, but we do hope to see you personally here in South Africa in the future. I see there's lots of positive feedback coming through, and I'm sure that an invitation would be most appropriate sometimes in the future to have you here personally, physically in South Africa. Thank you. There's lots of comments coming in thanking you actually right now as I see the chat box. So I just once again like to express the appreciation of all those who are on the Zoom meeting with us, as well as those who are joining us. Selvan Naidu says, inspirational talk. Thank you, Prabhu. So there's a flood of appreciation coming through. And on that note, I'd like to say thank you to our guests as well who've joined us, to our technical support team, to the management of Sri Sri Radharatna Temple for making this program possible, and of course to our speaker as well. And we hope to see all of you back here tomorrow evening, where we have Srivas Prabhu from Ghana, who is going to be presenting tomorrow evening's talk. Thank you once again, Sesha Prabhu. Hare
Happy
Krishna.
Janmashtami to everyone, and thank you very much. I'd love to come to South Africa sometime and be with all of you personally. Hare Krishna.